CNN chief medical correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta has more now. And in some ways, they were turning these because they thought they were safer than traditional cigarettes, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Erica. Look, you and I have kids who are about to be going into high school pretty soon. And as far as high school fads, which often come and go, this one seems to be sticking, and there's a lot of concern about it. Exactly for the reason you mentioned. There is a perceived harmlessness with this, but that's not the case. Take a look.
Electronic cigarettes, or electronic nicotine delivery systems, are battery-powered devices which heat a solution, usually containing nicotine, into an aerosol or vapor. The term electronic nicotine delivery systems refers to any device capable of producing these aerosols or vapors, and is synonymous with terms such as vape, vaporizer, vape pen, hookah pen, e-cigarette, and mods. These devices come in a variety of shapes and sizes and are uniquely filled with flavored propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin infused with or without nicotine. Dr. Michael Blaha for the Johns Hopkins Medical Journal highlights 4 critical components surrounding the use of e-cigarettes or vapes. First, with the present data collected on ENDs, they are less harmful than traditional smoking. ENDs heat flavorings, nicotine, and other chemicals to create a vapor that is inhaled. In comparison to traditional cigarettes, which contain over 7,000 chemicals, many of which are toxic, Dr. Blaha notes that there is almost no doubt that ENDs expose the user to fewer toxic chemicals than traditional cigarettes. The second is that despite ENDs being less toxic than traditional cigarettes, the nicotine in ENDs is highly addictive. Nicotine makes the user experience symptoms of craving and withdrawal, and can cause increases in heart rate and the potential for heart attacks. He notes that there are many unknown chemicals that make up the vapor in an END, and the physical health effects long-term are still inconclusive. The third is that the nicotine in ENDs is as addictive as traditional cigarettes. Specifically, Dr. Blaha notes that many END users get even more nicotine than they would from a tobacco product due to the variation and customizability of the cartridges that can be equipped to ENDs. In many cases, the cartridges contain higher nicotine contents and can be more addictive than traditional tobacco products. Lastly, Dr. Blaha highlights 3 reasons for the increase in adolescent use of ENDs. The first is that many teens believe vaping is less harmful than smoking. Second, ENDs have a lower per-use cost than traditional cigarettes. And lastly, vape cartridges are often created with flavors, which are very appealing to younger users. He argues that this could lead to the use of traditional tobacco products later in life and is thus of serious concern. Upon review of Canadian literature on ENDs and vaping, Health Canada released 3 significant findings. The first is in accordance with the Johns Hopkins review of ENDs, in that vaping is less harmful than traditional cigarette smoking. Vaping products do not contain tobacco, and thus do not involve the burning or production of smoke, nor the 7,000 toxic chemicals associated with it. In this regard, switching from tobacco cigarettes to vaping products will reduce a person's exposure to many toxic and cancer-causing chemicals. Health Canada highlights that the short-term studies on the use of ENDs have proven to increase general improvements in those who have completely switched from smoking cigarettes to ENDs. The second is that vaping possesses significant risks in and of itself. The exposure to vapor from ENDs and the nicotine contained within them can lead to the addiction and cardiovascular issues. Health Canada notes that adolescents and youth are particularly susceptible to the negative effects of nicotine and resulting addiction from END use due to their perception as being less harmful and better tasting than traditional tobacco consumption. Third, Health Canada notes the potential for exposure to other toxic chemicals exclusive to END use. While the main liquids in END products, vegetable glycerin and propylene glycol, are considered safe for use in many consumer products, the long-term safety of inhaling these substances in vaping products is unknown and continues to be assessed. Additionally, the potential for metal contaminants entering the vapor exists, dependent upon the size and heating capabilities of the END. In this video, I will discuss how ENDs, or e-cigarettes, have become a serious health concern for youths ages 13 to 24. Specifically, the effects of ENDs on youth segments, health risks, and cultural implications. Lastly, I will conclude by describing what has been done and what is being done to educate and study the effects of ENDs with a specific focus on solutions to the vape epidemic affecting North America. Per Lindstrom and Rosevall's 2017 research paper, Addictive Behaviors, Social and Physical Factors, and Electronic Cigarette Use Among Adolescents, the argument that flavors such as fruit, alcohol, or sweet flavors of vape cartridges were designed to encourage vaping in underage or youth peoples. In fact, through the 2016 Canadian Student Tobacco, Alcohol, and Drug Survey, Health Canada found that 13% of Canadians aged 13 to 24 had tried an END at least once in their lifetime. Of this 13% of Canadians, 23% of students in grades 7 to 12 had reported trying an END in their lifetime, 10% of which identified having used an END within 30 days of the survey. What is particularly noteworthy is that 53% of all Canadian students in high schools noted that it would be fairly easy or very easy to get a vaping product if they wanted one. In support of these findings by Health Canada was the 2016 Surgeon General's report, highlighting that there was a 900% increase in the use of ENDs in U.S. high schools since 2011, and has thus become a nationwide health epidemic. Many ENDs contain nicotine, which can harm adolescent brain development, result in addiction, and may expose youth to harmful chemicals such as diacetyl and formaldehyde, which have been linked to lung disease. Per a 2017 journal article from the University of Michigan on the study of e-cigarette use of grade 12 high school students with a follow-up survey 1 year later, concluded that students in grade 12 high schools across 48 U.S. states that had tried an END device in high school were 4 times more likely to have tried other tobacco products the following year. As well, grade 12 students that had used an END device through grade 12 were twice as likely to become regular users the following year. These results contribute to the growing body of evidence supporting vaping as a one-way bridge to cigarette smoking among youth, and that vaping is a strong risk factor in determining future tobacco use and health risks later in life. The 2018 Canadian Cancer Society's report on the prevalence and usage of tobacco and ENDs noted that there are now 65 post-secondary institutions that prohibit smoking anywhere on campus. In 2018, Western University implemented the first of its 3-phase policy to render the university smoke-free by the summer of 2019. This has come as a result of growing pressure to join the ranks of universities such as Dalhousie, McMaster, Regina, and the University of Toronto, all of whom have been smoke-free since 2003. The 3-phase approach to enabling Western a smoke-free campus began with the launch of its Clear the Air campaign in 2015, where the university surveyed its student population and found that a majority of students would prefer Western to be smoke-free. The first phase of this campaign, beginning in 2015, asked students and faculty to stay a minimum of 10 meters from any campus building while using ENDs and traditional smoking methods. The second phase, effective July 1st of 2018, was implemented at a limited number of designated smoking areas on periphery campus sites, effectively eliminating smoking and the use of ENDs on campus grounds. The third and final phase, effective July 1st, 2019, will be to remove the designated smoking areas on the periphery of campus, establishing Western a completely smoke-free university. This campaign, along with the nationwide trend towards banning the use of traditional smoking and ENDs on campus, is of paramount importance to Canadian universities. Given the long-standing history of the effects of traditional smoking on the human body, in combination with the rise in usage of ENDs out of high schools and into Canadian universities, both Western and the lion's share of universities in Canada have decided that the overall health benefits of implementing a smoking ban far outweigh the individual desires of users to smoke on campus grounds. To provide context on the concerns around the use of ENDs by Health Canada, the Johns Hopkins Medical Journal, the Surgeon General's report, and studies at Michigan University, I sat down with a current fourth-year Western University student and former youth smoker of traditional cigarettes, who has transitioned to one of the most popular ENDs on the market, the Juul, to get his perspective around the use of ENDs and their ban at Western. First try a cigarette, and when did you first try an electronic nicotine delivery system?
I was in grade 9, but when I was like 15 or so, and it really started all like when I went to these high school parties. Cigarettes like weren't really my thing, but I'd have the occasional one at like a social event. The first time I tried like a vape or an e-pen though was in grade 12, and a buddy of mine had tried to quit smoking cigarettes by transitioning to one of these. At first he claimed they were much healthier than like a regular cigarette. And then the ability to mask the taste of nicotine, which obviously appealed to me as well. So it just seemed like a better overall experience.
What was your cigarette usage like over the course of your time at Western, and what made you want to switch to vaping and the Juul product in particular?
I pretty much kept my cigarette smoking to nights, out after bars, and in between high-stress studying sessions for midterms and finals. I tried a Juul for the first time out last year when one of my friends got one over the Christmas break. And he said the size and shape of it made it super convenient, as well as the fact that it'd be less harmful on our health. So personally, the Juul had a sort of sophistication and a convenience to it, and that's why I chose to buy and use one instead of traditional cigarettes.
How long do you see yourself using the Juul, and what would you say to a high school kid that is thinking of getting one as an alternative to smoking cigarettes?
I see myself using one as long as I continue to go out and have to study for exams, to be honest. I'd tell that high school kid to wait as long as he can before trying any tobacco or vape products, because once you do, it's a slippery slope, and you know it, you might have developed a minor addiction to it, just like me.
How do you feel about Western's ban on smoking and the use of ENDs on campus?
Oh, I fully support it. I think there's a lot to be said for doing away with secondhand smoke and the general annoyance of cigarette smoke around campus buildings, all that stuff. So personally, it is a bit of an inconvenience for me to use the Juul now, but overall I think vaping or using a Juul is much better for you than smoking a regular cigarette, and I think it's going to be the future of the way people intake nicotine.
Due to the recency with which ENDs have entered the consumer market, conclusive evidence on the long-term health implications of using ENDs has yet to be established. Despite a lack of scientific evidence, both Health Canada and the United States Federal Drug Administration have determined that there are three very serious health implications associated with the consistent use of ENDs. The first is the potential for developing a nicotine addiction. Preventative Medicine's journal entry entitled "To Vape or Not to Vape" notes that vaping nicotine products can lead to the development of a nicotine addiction. While some argue that using ENDs can help cigarette smokers to quit their addiction, the journal entry highlights that traditional cigarette smokers are 4 times as likely to develop an addiction to an END after making the switch. The second health implication relates to the early onset of nicotine addiction amongst youths. In this regard, nicotine has proven to alter and stunt the development of the brain in youths. For this reason, the authors of "To Vape or Not to Vape" stress the importance of keeping END use out of the hands of those under the age of 18 years old. Additionally, due to the varying levels of nicotine contents amongst END cartridges and liquids, Health Canada notes that the potential for nicotine poisoning amongst frequent END users is that much higher. The third health implication relates to the inhalation of END liquids. Despite the clearance of chemicals such as glycol, glycerol, and vegetable glycerin that have been approved in North America for some consumer products in use, the long-term health implications of inhaling a vaporized version of these chemicals has yet to be determined. In this way, both the US FDA and Health Canada have issued strong health warnings around the consistent inhalation of END liquids that contain these chemicals. Further, research is needed to conclusively determine the health implications surrounding the use and inhalation of END liquids. Due to a lack of conclusive scientific evidence on the medium and long-term health effects of ENDs and the chemicals contained within them, there are significant variations amongst consumer perceptions of the risks and dangers of using ENDs. Hannah Fairmont's journal entry in the International Journal of Drug Policy identifies 3 categories of vape users and their associated perceptions. The first are those who vape for pleasure. Those within this category believe that ENDs are an effective substitute to traditional cigarettes, citing the joy associated with being able to vape different flavors as a main reason for using an END. Additionally, these people derived a high level of satisfaction from the perception that ENDs are a healthy alternative to traditional tobacco use, citing this as a motivating factor for quitting smoking and starting vaping. The pleasure vapors do not see nicotine addiction as an illness and feel a strong sense of community associated with being an END user. The second category are those who use ENDs as a medical treatment. Those within this category had quit smoking cigarettes through the use of ENDs, citing their improvements in health as the #1 reason for taking up END use. Additionally, those under the view of ENDs as a medical treatment believe that smoking is an addiction, and that those over the age of 18 should be advised and allowed to use ENDs as a remedy to their smoking addictions. The medical treatment advocates do not feel a strong community feeling around being an END user, and believe it should be seen as a medical treatment and not an identity. The third category of END users were labeled the ambivalent users. Those within this category are both current cigarette and END users who believe that there should be an age restriction on the sale and use of ENDs, just as there are in traditional tobacco products. The ambivalent END users do not support arguments for medical or social benefits and believe that ENDs simply should be at each individual's discretion. One of the main reasons people who use ENDs continue to do so is the sense of community associated with their usage. As traditional cigarettes were once portrayed as a means of socialization, so too have become ENDs. With regards to the use of ENDs amongst youths, a critical component of the steep rise in youth usage can be attributed to what is known as vape culture. Per the 2017 article, Risk Factors for Youth E-Cigarette Vape Trick Behavior of the Journal of Adolescent Health, it was found that peer usage and social media were the 2 primary contributors as to why youths who do not smoke chose to purchase and use ENDs. Specifically, the article cites smoke trick videos, where individuals create shapes and images using the vapor from ENDs as the #1 medium of social media for encouraging youth to try them. In this regard, vape trick videos created a trend which youths were fascinated by and is directly linked to the increase in the number of youths using ENDs. Since their introduction to the consumer market in 2007, Canada and the United States have been working to implement regulations around the use of ENDs in their respective countries. In Canada, this regulation has come by way of the federal implementation of the Canadian Scientific Advisory Board on vaping products. In 2017, Health Canada, in collaboration with the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, established this board to review the scientific literature on the potential health benefits and harms of vaping products and to provide recommendations on the federal legislative framework for vaping products. Recently, the Canadian Scientific Advisory Board was critical in the implementation of the Canadian Tobacco and Vaping Products Act, or TVPA, in 2018. The TVPA was designed to protect youth from nicotine addiction and incentives for using tobacco and vaping products, as well as allowing adults to access vaping products as a less harmful option to smoking. In the U.S., states possess the unique jurisdictional right to govern certain aspects surrounding the actual use of ENDs. However, the Food and Drug Administration oversees the regulations around sales, imports, manufacturing, and health labels on END products. In 2018, the FDA ruled that all covered tobacco products, including ENDs, must bear the required nicotine addictiveness warning statement on product packages and advertisements. Lastly, on September 28, 2018, the FDA conducted a surprise inspection of the headquarters of END maker Juul Labs, seizing thousands of documents related to the company's sales and marketing practices. This has come as a result of increased pressure for the government to further regulate the END industry, specifically as it pertains to the nicotine youth epidemic from END use, for which Juul has been labeled a primary contributor. Juul controls roughly 72% of the END market in the US, having sold over 16 million units in 2016 and reported sales of $1.3 billion in 2017-2018. In addition to the campus-wide bans on the use of cigarettes and ENDs in Canada, universities across North America should continue to promote health awareness campaigns around ENDs, highlighting the addictive and chemical risks associated with their use. This can be done via seminars, posters, and clubs promoting nicotine-free lifestyles. Additionally, because some students enter university under the age of 18, universities and colleges in North America should implement and enforce stricter regulations around the use of ENDs in residence buildings and associated spaces. At the provincial and state level, governments should continue to study and educate their populations on the medium and long-term risks associated with END use. This would stem from government-subsidized research studies and awareness campaigns using methods such as television and radio ads, surveys, posters, billboards, and pamphlets, similar to the way anti-drunk driving campaigns have been executed. In this way, provinces and states will position themselves to advocate and advise on federal legislation around the use of ENDs. At the national or federal level, government should continue to research studies across all provinces, territories, and states, thus collecting relevant, conclusive data on the health implications of END use on the entire population. Federal government should continue to prosecute and scrutinize companies that have been profiting off youth usage of ENDs, such as Juul Labs. Additionally, a top-down approach to subsidies and grants for research and awareness campaigns on END use should be provided by the national governments upon establishing a set of cohesive goals and guidelines with provinces and states. As noted by both Health Canada and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the research surrounding the long-term effects of using ENDs is inconclusive. However, what is evident is that END use amongst youth has increased significantly to the point of a nationwide epidemic in the U.S. and at the very least of significant concern in Canada. This has led to an increase in the resources allocated towards regulating, researching, and advising governments on the health risks associated with END use, such as addiction, exposure to toxic chemicals, and stunted brain development. Additionally, other measures have been implemented, such as the university and college smoking and END bans, the Canadian Scientific Advisory Board on vaping, and a crackdown on labeling and sales of ENDs, as seen in the U.S. on companies like Juul Labs. I believe that conclusive scientific evidence from government research that is then made available to the public will enable governments to advise and implement legislation aimed at the shifting of cultural perceptions on the use of ENDs and enforce effective regulations on society's use of these products.